All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's 3:32 p.m. I'm calling this meeting of the Maple Broadband Executive Committee for August 1st, 2024 to order. Good afternoon, everyone, this hot and sultry day. Nice to see everyone. So first on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay. Would anyone like to make any changes, suggestions? All right, all in favor of approving the agenda, raise your hand or say aye. Okay, and that's all of you. Next up is approval of the minutes from July 11th and July 25th. So I've distributed those minutes. You've all had a chance to review them. The 25th, Steve and I were the only people there, so I can warrant that they're accurate from my perspective.
Yep, I'd move we approve of those, Ellie.
Yeah, can I get a second?
Second.
All right, any comments, edits? All right, all in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
I think we probably have all but one abstention there, but.
Correct.
Yeah.
Jeff is, of course, abstaining. All right, great. Public comments. Would anyone like to make a public comment? No. Okay, great. So, Executive Director report. I think I'm going to focus today on what I have upcoming in the coming weeks. So, as Steve sent around yesterday, there's a press conference that I don't know, we didn't go to because it was only open to the press, wasn't open to the public, which is bizarre. But one can only presume that Alan Davidson having an announcement about Vermont's Internet for All plan means that Vermont's Volume 2 was approved today, which is great. And that means that as soon as later today even or tomorrow, the VCBB should release its request for applications. Not that they're due for several months, but they have it ready, and that's great because we've been saying for a long time, give us the detailed program rules so that we can start preparing. So obviously having a look at that is super exciting. And in relation to that, we have later on the agenda today a request for decision and vote on BEAD design services, but obviously, in anticipation of that, working with the prospective winner, working to get the legal contract done and get them up and running is going to be a big priority because some of the work that they're doing is a critical path to making sure that we have the right data at the right time to be as well informed as possible. And as you guys all know, we have a new marketing firm. They started today. I have further down in the agenda more updates as to that, but I just spent about 2 hours with them talking about things, and I have a little bit of show and tell later, but I'm even more excited now than I was a couple of weeks ago. The difference is palpable and very refreshing, and I'm very happy. The other thing is I'm nearly completed, and I plan to complete tomorrow because I actually don't have any meetings tomorrow except for one I just agreed to do with London Middlebury. But I need to get my first set of revisions on the network management agreements over to legal. We did have our kickoff meeting with Barry Dunn on the accounting side earlier this week, and so all the balls are in their court now, which is great. And I think a lot of the work that's happening, there's two things they're doing. So one is helping us with standard operating procedures between ourselves and Waitsfield. And so the first thing that they're doing there is understanding what Waitsfield standard operating procedures are in order to because some of the more detailed parts we may just simply want to adopt to the degree practical for consistency. And then the other part is helping us out with our match analysis. Further to that match analysis, I did say in my email, but our allocation out of the $30 million from the legislature, should we be successful in our BEAD application, is $3.49 million. So that's some part of the match, which is already available to us. But remember, we have to come up with a 25% match across our budget as well as Waitsfield's budget. But that's going to be a joint effort to get to that match. Steve?
Any clue at all, Ellie, how much we're going to need for a match? What's your swag?
No clue yet. Too early for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Could you say again, what was our share of that?
Well, Maple Broadband, the district, has received an allocation of it's in the email I sent you with the agenda. It's $3,495,253.
Yeah, I guess the reason for the question was it's kind of key to our success or our ability to build. And what are you thinking about borrowings if necessary? Are you prepared with that?
That's another thing I'm working on. So, just trying to think of what's the best. If you don't mind, I'll handle that under the bead update, because I think I could tell a more comprehensive story than like jumping into it and then I have nothing to say in the bead update because we've covered it. But yes, one of the other things going up is financial modeling related to bead and figuring out, because as we've all talked about, there's conceptually simply, there is things we're going to build with bead money, things that we want to build that are not eligible for bead or ARPA, that are like, for example, the buried areas and virgens that are served by Comcast and only Comcast. So separating out those two and figuring out how much is in pot A, that's our bead project budget, what's our plan for that, how much is in pot B. But in order to do pot B, we need to take on debt anyway. So if we need to take on a little bit of additional debt to cover bead match, it's not as though it's a binary thing where it's like, oh no, we need to have a little bit of debt only for bead match. We're taking on debt regardless, so we can build out those cabled areas. I mean, I suppose one could have a discussion about the timing of taking on that debt, because in theory, we could build those cabled areas a year later. So that's also part of what I'm trying to run through, and we'll bounce off Jeff as another set of eyes to make sure that this is, in fact, the prudent choice to be doing it this way. So this, and then the other thing that I want to do this month, mainly just to get it done before we start, because there's things that are happening this month related to bead, but a lot of them are what our subcontractor, our contractors and partners are doing. But before we get into, and of course there are things that we can work on once this request for applications is out there, but what I want to do before we start to get really silly busy with bead is to get the remaining bits of the second half asset capitalization over to Cy and Darlene, because as we've talked about, we want to have that done on a quarterly basis. And so I think a couple of weeks ago when Cy was out, I finished 2023 and sent that to her, which she'll update when we get there. But I want to do the first half of 2024, and then after that go into a quarterly cadence, which is really how we should be doing it. And the amount of work I should have to do going forward should be reduced, because now Darlene has a lot that's documented and she doesn't need to be told every last little thing, but there are some things that are still going to require executive director eyes, essentially. And then the final thing is also trying to get ahead of the curve a little bit, is that, as you all know, we need to have our draft budget out to our member towns by the end of October. So it needs to be passed by the governing board in October, which means we need to be looking at it in September, which means I need to be starting on it this month. So that's basically what's on the plan for the next couple of weeks.
When you're not putting up clothes to dry with your daughter.
Yeah, or going on vacation later this month.
Right.
So that is my executive director report. Any questions for me or concerns? Okay,
yeah,
Steve, over to you.
I got lots of concerns, Ellie. How are you going to get all that done in a month?
Oh, it's simple. I just don't sleep.
Okay, fair enough. There is a lot on the agenda. I know Ellie wants to try to get this wrapped up by 5. I'll make this really brief. First of all, subscriber count, 361 active customers, and according to Lee Cheney, there's about 35 or 36 additional subscribers in queue for installation in the next couple weeks. So prospects are continuing to look good there. I wanted to say the same thing Ellie already said. She's gone in about 3 weeks for about a week. So we'll have to work around that. But to that point, the other item is that we, as an executive committee, are due to deal with her performance review this month now. And so I think at the end of today's meeting, when we talk about next meetings, I'd like to ask Ellie that we talk about 2 meetings. One is what we need to have everybody together, including Ellie, and the other meeting being another where it's everybody but Ellie, so we can talk about our performance review. So I'm hoping we can pick dates for those 2 at the end of the meeting. And that's it. That's my report.
Great. Any questions for Steve? Okay, so moving on. The first item under item 6.6a is bead design services RFP decision. So I will do a screen share here. Let me find it. I sent this to Steve already. I didn't send it out to everyone because it's a little bit in the weeds, but it's just for the purposes of transparency. So this is the bid leveling that was done. We received 3 bids. One is from Vantage Point, one is from JSI, and one is from Fibersmith. And Fibersmith's, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
And we sent out the RFP to 5 known competent wizards. So getting this many back is great.
Yeah, exactly. So, so obviously Vantage Point is the known quantity. You know, we know what we'd be getting from them. JSI, Waitsfield was actually one of their references, and Todd and Lee say extremely wonderful things about them. And if you guys know Todd at all, he's a tough customer, and he doesn't mince his words. And so if he has nothing bad to say about them, that's really a great endorsement in my book, honestly.
Yeah.
Fibersmith also has a very good reputation. They, however, somehow managed to completely misunderstand the scope, and they quoted us on designing our entire network, including what's already been designed. So I think that some of their fees may be incorrect as a result of economies of scale or more work than what they would actually be getting. But so I think Steve and I talked about this, and we didn't have a very long conversation before we arrived at the decision that we thought that the best decision here would be to award this to JSI. So there's one of the reasons is, as I just said, that Waitsfield highly recommends them. There's the potential to batch work with work that they're doing on the same time frame for BEAD for Waitsfield. They have existing resources in the area, which is important. And this was actually a pleasant surprise. They gave us a fixed bid, unlike the others, which is time and materials. And as you can see, the fixed bid compares quite favorably to the Vantage Point, which is, you know, from what we've experienced with Vantage Points, the estimates are floors on what we'll pay versus ceilings or reasonable estimates. So for that reason, it's my recommendation, and Steve, you can speak for yourself, that we award this work to JSI.
What I'd like to do is formally get this through, and so I'm going to make a motion that we award the work to JSI, and then after we have a second and approve that, we can have discussion. So I'm making a motion that we approve JSI for the BEAD design work. Is there a second? Thank you. Okay. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Wait, I thought you wanted discussion.
Yeah,
discussion, Steve.
We're raising our hand to agree to the second. Okay, never mind. We're having a discussion. Sorry for the miscommunication. Questions?
Yeah.
What is the source of funds to pay for this work? Do we have that commitment already?
We would pay for this out of pre-construction funds, of which we have, let's look at the dashboard, quite a lot left. More than sufficient.
Okay. And is the commitment to the work contingent on being successful in the BEAD application, and therefore we don't incur any cost? Or are we doing this on speculation and getting it underway immediately using pre-construction funds, assuming award?
I apologize, Jeff. I was too quick to answer your question. So there's actually 2 parts to this scope, and this bid leveling outlines them. So part A, which you wouldn't know unless you read the RFP, which of course you didn't. So part A is the pre-award scope, and that is assisting us with the necessary in order to be able to submit a BEAD application. And actually, we did receive a capacity grant from the VCBB that would pay for possibly not all, but a portion of this, because we're meant to share that with Waitsfield. So a chunk of that we can pay for out of the BEAD capacity grant. We could choose to. We could also choose not to, and pay for it all out of pre-construction and use more of the BEAD capacity grant in other areas. But conceptually, part of that, and then the other part. So part B is the post-award amount, and that is contingent on receiving the BEAD award. So if we're not successful in BEAD, we've capped our exposure at this $28,000.
Thank you.
Let me just add my comments. We're running as fast as we can because we have a limited amount of time to get this design work done, and we also have to take a bunch of steps in order before we can really begin the work, like insurance certificates, non-disclosure agreement. We already have one. Those kinds of things. So there's an intervening process. Another one is there's an agreement, a service agreement that is in front of us from JSI. It's not perfect at all. We're just preempting this. We've already presented this to our attorney, and he's come back with, there's some markups. So it's going to go back to JSI. Ellie has to review it. She might modify it, but ultimately, hopefully she can turn it around fast, send it back to JSI. We may be cycling that again. So it's those kinds of things that are that we need to kind of track and could impact our ability to do this. The two items that I got an opportunity to read all this stuff too. Ellie's doing the heavy lifting, but I'm actually seeing the MSA, the Master Services Agreement, and things like that. So I know a little. And one item that I noticed, Ellie, is, and I think I texted you about this as well, is that in the MSA it specifies service levels that can be found in the scope of work document. So there's two documents. There's the Master Services Agreement and a scope of work document. Scope of work, as you can imagine, is the description of the stuff that they're going to do for us. So in the scope of work document, according to the MSA, there's language about service levels. Well, there's no language about service levels in the scope document, and to me, service levels are important because especially when we're going fast here. So my first suggestion to you, Ellie, is to track that as appropriate. The other one is kind of similar. When Ellie and I interviewed the JSI folks after Ellie had done her bid leveling, we talked a little bit about the fact that the scope of this first phase of work has 4 components. 3 components are pretty straightforward, and they're all part of that flat fee that they're quoting. And the 4th component is other jobs as required, which we all know is not going to be part of that flat. So I think that the reason I raise it is that we talked about it. I suggested to them that we'll track this and we'll make sure that we're well informed about when JSI believes we've gone outside the bounds of the scope that we've agreed to. They need to tell us that, and Ellie needs to approve it. And we haven't. I wasn't happy with their response when we had that conversation, Ellie. So I guess if in your transactions or part of your approval of the scope of work or something like that, please just include some kind of caveat about that so that we're covered.
Yep, we'll make sure that we have a legal way to handle that. And the other thing I wanted to say quickly is that amount I just put up there of the $98,000 for Part B, that's actually an estimate. So the fixed fee is a per mile fee, but the number of miles in Part B is going to depend on Part A. So that's an estimate of what it'll be. So the actual amount is $1,400 a mile for the detailed design and all of the other scope post award, but the actual mileage may vary. Pun intended.
So anyhow, those are my 2 notes. I think we absolutely need to go on this, and we really need to make a decision today because we want to keep the ball in play. For example, that we use this conversation as a lever to get matters moving aggressively already. So that would be my only suggestion. And again, I'm completely in support of awarding this to JSI.
Yep.
Further discussion. All right, call a question. All in favor of awarding this work to JSI as specified, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Very excited about that. Okay, so next up is Leicester Hub Civils. So we sent out a request for quote for the civil work required to build the Leicester Hub. And while Steve's pulling that up, just an update. The Leicester Hub easement approval is on the docket for the select board meeting on Monday. We've sent them the zoning application as well that will be signed at the same time, presuming that the easement is signed. And I think that the chair is expecting everything to go smoothly because they're already sending me some transactional questions about invoicing and things along those lines. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah, we've communicated to our Syracuse Utilities and WCVT our expectation that we're going to be mired in approvals this month, and by the end of this month, we'll have everything we need to proceed, and that we're also estimating at a high level that our contractor is building the pad.
See you at bedtime.
Bye-bye, sweetie. Yep.
I
Okay.
suddenly-
So sorry.
I suddenly feel so unimportant.
And you'd
She's
be
going to
right
the
about
library.
that. You'd be absolutely right about that.
I don't even, oh yeah, what I was going to say was that I'm ballparking that the pad itself will take about a month to build, so that puts us at the end of September. So one of the things I'm a little worried about, but I'm sure Syracuse we understand, is that they're going to be pretty much done with their work before that, with everything they can do without having the pad there. And I don't know quite how it's all going to get handled. They may have to come back to do the remaining work. I don't know, but they're aware of it, so we'll be fine there. I can make this bigger.
By the way, Steve, their quote explicitly included mobilization. So whether they have to pay for it, because I think it's a different crew anyway. So
You're talking about Syracuse Utilities?
yeah, I think it's
Okay.
different crews that work on the civils than are doing the aerial construction. So that mobilization, regardless of when it happens, that's included in what their quote was.
Right. So to kind of explain what you're looking at here, a third party can come in and do most of the work to build out the pad, but the actual connection to the network, to the electrical network, must be done by a electrician licensed in Vermont. So for previous builds in phase one, Syracuse Utilities did everything except that final connection, and then at WCBT's recommendation, I reached out to one individual who's an electrician who handled activating our hubs down in phase one, also those 3 hubs. So so that's kind of the standard approach that we had to take, because Syracuse doesn't work in Vermont. They just come in here. So we had to get a local electrician. So when we did the hub up in Virgins, that was different. And the organization that won that bid was Champlain Construction, and they subbed, as part of their bid, the electrical work was included. So when I put this out to bid, knowing that we have 2 different ways of doing this, I know that Syracuse Utilities they need to have me take care of the electrician work, whereas Champlain Construction can include the electrician's work in their scope. So what you see there is the fact that despite that fact, they're awfully close, which to me only says, we've got sufficient numbers in that we've got meaningful information. Champlain Construction is based here in Middlebury. Syracuse Utilities, where they're based. So the only adjustment that I show there is that the people at Champlain Construction, I wanted to make sure they understood the scope of activating the equipment. So basically, Syracuse Utilities will be setting the cabinet in place and securing it. Then they're going to walk away, and our electrician will come back and do what's needed to connect everything to the network. So after that reviewing, the number went up a little bit, but what I'm moving here is that we award the work to Champlain Construction. They are a known commodity. They did a satisfactory job. No complaints at all about what we did, with a pretty big job up in Virgins. And the fact that they also bring along an electrician, so I don't have to wrangle that other person, which had been a bit of a headache for us in the past, then I think that just is really kind of the ideal solution for us. So having said all that, I'll move that we award the equipment pad project to Champlain Construction in the amount of $30,060. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussions. Okay. Great. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for doing that bid leveling. Okay, so next up is WCVT operations update. So I've sent you guys all the deck that I wanted to run through in the meeting today. So I'm not sure how many have actually looked at it, but that's really what I wanted to do, is go ahead and do a screen share and talk about what's in here. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So this slide here, as you folks will recall, a couple of months back, we agreed on some high priority customer service items. And the idea was that once we moved through the high priority items and got them all ticked off, then we would start to move down the stack into the lower priority or the medium priority and then lower priority items. So I wanted to give an update as to where we are on these. So again, you've all had a chance to review this. The only addition I have since I sent this out is that this part about making sure the customers receive the emails at defined milestones, part of the meeting I had with London Middlebury earlier is that they're familiar both with the Zapier automation platform and with ActiveCampaign, which is the mailing. They recommended that over MailChimp. I mean, they're quite similar in price, but it's more feature rich and better for automation of this sort of thing as opposed to just general mailing lists. So having heard what we wanted to do with it, they had a quite strong recommendation. Noah had a look and said, yes, it does seem to be more feature rich. So I signed up for a 2-week free trial of that. And the plan is for them to, as quickly as possible, get this operationalized so that customers will start receiving emails. So that's really, I will require approval from the executive committee to go ahead and purchase that annual subscription.
We approve the annual subscription of $1,788 for ActiveCampaign. Is there a second? We have a second from Jeff. Discussion.
Jeff,
all
you're
in
muted.
favor?
Jeff's trying to talk, but he's muted.
Sorry. I assume we have budget for this or can move money from some other line item?
Yes.
Got it.
We have headroom in our marketing budget now that we've reduced our retainer from nearly $7,000 a month to $3,000 a month.
Nice.
Yep.
Any other discussion? All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Great. Thank you. Okay, Nancy.
I'm wondering about what you see as next steps on that first item.
I think possibly what we could do is we could take this. Part of what London Middlebury wants to do or intends to do is some research for us, as you know. And part of that research is going to involve talking to customers and understanding the journey. And so part of what we could add to that scope is checking customers, say, who were installed from July onwards, where this certainly should have been in place, and asking customers what their, both as surveys and maybe actual interviews to try and see. But it's tough because it's not like we're out there policing what's going on. And so at a certain level, we just have to trust what's going on. So we can do a little bit of attempting to validate or verify.
But I mean,
Steve.
what subcontractors particularly would you be worried about?
Well, they have drop subcontractors that go and run the drops. I mean,
Yep.
Jeff experienced this, if I recall, where there was some subcontractor that didn't have a Maple Broadband logo, and then when he asked, he said they were there for WCBT. So it's that sort of confusing customer communication that we want to avoid. But the thing is, I'm not sure. I mean, if Waitsfield says they're doing it or they're communicating, but they can't completely control the subcontractors. But unless we go and ask every customer, it's really hard to know what that actual customer experience is. So I don't know if you have any ideas about what more we could be doing.
Well, I mean, is it about what the subcontractors say, or what's displayed on their truck, or what's displayed on their shirt, or is it all of those things?
It's most of those things. I think the main one is that they have something on their shirt that identifies them, and when asked, they spit out the proper brand name.
Yeah.
So, I mean, probably of the hierarchy is what's coming out of their mouth is the most important. Second most important is that they have our logo somewhere.
Yeah.
That the customer can see.
Okay.
I don't know how many people rely on caller ID at their homes, but I know from my dealings with Maple Broadband to get service here at my home, it's been kind of a mixed bag. I'd say probably 90% of the time, caller ID says Maple Broadband, and the other 10 or 20% of the time says Waitsfield Telecom or something like that. So to me, that should be pretty easy to fix. I think the problem is that they maybe don't have a tight voice infrastructure, so it may be harder to do than one could imagine. And it's hard to report. I've been reporting to Ellie whenever I have interactions. Most of the time they've been fine. It's just a little iffy, a little on the bubble.
So part of that next step is to, to put London Middlebury on it too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, anything else on this one? Okay, so the next one is where I thought we might have more discussion. So go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, can we go back to the prior slide? I thought it was about that bullet.
Oh,
so
sorry.
The next item on the customers receive door hangers, the next step says discuss verification validation options. So do these crews have a checklist that they have to complete before they leave someone's driveway?
They do. So that's one of the things I wanted to raise with Waitsfield. The operational crew that's responsible for this, they were both out this week at a training or a conference or something. So I haven't raised it yet. And anecdotally, again, it's really hard to tell because they say they're doing it, and then sometimes I email customers and they say, no, I didn't get it. And it could have been that it blew off, or it could have been that the customer forgot. I mean, goodness only knows. But that was one of the questions I had, Jeff, is, okay, you say you're doing it, but it's on your checklist. Are you checking the checklist to make sure the subcontractors are doing it? How do we account for this discrepancy? How would you, how are you guys measuring to make sure that this actually consistently happens?
Thank you.
Okay. Anything more on any of these items?
Well, I guess I should make, it's not quite topical, Ellie, but I'll try to make it quick. The subject came up 6 months to a year ago about, actually it was about the bad problem with the pedestal that they used and they shouldn't have. And I raised the question of, are they doing spot checks on the installations done by the drop crews? And the response was, we can't do all of those things. It was basically, the scope is too big. There's just not, so they didn't really say yes. They could say, we'll do 1% and it would be something, but really we need to maybe do it. I think Ellie and I even talked about the idea that I could go out and do some drop surveys just to inspect to see if everything looks right. It wouldn't even necessarily be a visit, a conversation with the homeowner. It would be to look to see the physical aspects of the install to see if they're being done properly. We don't know if WCVT is, how tightly they're tracking their contractors.
How about if we suggest that Jared from Mission Broadband take a half day and look at drops?
Great idea.
Okay. This isn't really
list,
exactly
right?
topical in this one.
Yeah, give them a list. Maybe keep them in the same town or something like that, so we can, maybe the one that was later after we, not in 1A, down there, farther down in the lists where people are getting used to things and getting sloppy.
Yeah, and or up in Virgins where we know that they were using different subcontractors and lots of things trying to handle that backlog.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you guys for the feedback. This is great discussion. Okay, so the second thing was, as you all know, I've had the kind of perception for some time that things take quite a long time, but didn't have any data to back it up. So I asked Noah, please, to have a look at this. And so I think I explained this in the email or somewhere, but so we know the date that a customer installation happened, and we count how long they've been waiting, either from the date that the serving area went live, if they placed their order prior to that, or from the date they placed their order, if the serving area went live prior to when they placed their order. So we obviously want to take that out of consideration. On the next slide, I actually break out the two so we can see them differently. And then, of course, when we looked at it, the numbers were really huge. And I said, okay, we need to break out aerial and buried, because with buried, anything could happen. There's seasonality, there's conduits, let's just look at the aerial orders so that we remove any noise, because the aerial orders, as we all know, it's relatively straightforward. You have aerial plants, you do your scout, you do your drop, you contact the customer to get installation. So that's as easy as it gets. This is a best case scenario for how fast we can install these. Let's just have a look at what these are. And so these are installations conducted through June 2024. We can update this in the coming weeks with the July installations because we get a report from Waitsfield early each month, which tells us all the customers and their installation date. And then we can look back in CrowdFiber and see, do we count from their order date or the service area activation date? So this is our visualization. So I hadn't put it into weeks. So this is days, but it's basically weeks. So this is people who got installed in 1 week or under, 1 to 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, 5 to all the way up. And the bottom line here, as you can see, is that we have 44% of customers where it took greater than 6 weeks from order to service activation. And then, so the very first question I asked is, okay, well, how much of this could be accounted for because of backlogs when we turn up a whole bunch of areas all at once? And again, it's kind of hard to tell. We probably need to take a little bit more detail to figure out, like, is there a month or two where it just skewed the numbers? And we haven't done that yet, but regardless, the first question was just to separate out the ones where we calculated based on the order dates, so the serving area was live and then they placed their order, or when the serving area went live. And I'm sorry, this visualization is not quite right. It's not that it's wrong, it's just a little bit misleading because these percentages are percentages of like all the red orders or all the blue orders. So that's why it looks kind of funny. But the ones where the serving area went live first actually got served, or fewer of them, fewer as a percent, greater total number, but fewer percent had to wait 6 weeks or longer. So the conclusion is that doesn't seem to be the factor. It's possible that, like I said, if we take a look at a month when a lot was going on, that might have skewed things a little bit. But early analysis of data is not flattering. So what does that mean? It means on average, customers are waiting several weeks for service activation. That doesn't tell us what parts of the process are taking a long time. So that, as soon as I first saw this data, I said to Noah, okay, we need to understand how long does it take to do scout, how long does it take to do drop, how long does it take to do the installation, or how long does it take to schedule the installation, and then from there to do the installation. Because as Steve said, we saw a report from Waitsfield earlier today. There's people scheduled now for late August, possibly because they're away or it's not convenient or whatever. So some of that time frame has to do with customer choice, and you kind of want to separate that noise out, but also understand where's the bottleneck, right? And presumably this is a workforce issue, but it may also be a management issue where they're just not aware. Anyway, regardless, so since July 24th, we've been collecting more granular data on CrowdFiber. So how we do that is when they go into CrowdFiber at each point in the process and flip to say, okay, scout complete is now true, drop complete is now true, install scheduled is now true. And the date that happens is not necessarily the date that the work happened. So for example, people go out and do a bunch of scouts, there'll be paper sitting on someone's desk, Mark looks at them, and then CrowdFiber gets updated. So the numbers will not be accurate, but they'll be directional. So if we find out that an average, for example, of scout complete is 13 days, it's probably actually 10 days plus a few days to update it. But at least that skew is probably going to be consistent for the different parts of the process. So just giving you guys a heads up as to how to look at the future numbers you'll be seeing. And I think, so these bottom two bullets, the second one is that I think we need to have a conversation with Waitsfield, and I would love to get your feedback about how do we do that? How do we tee that up? But I think we need to have a conversation with them about, in an ideal world, what would this number be? And can we work towards getting to that number? And then we also need to set appropriate expectations with customers, so we're under-promising and over-delivering. And I did have this conversation with London Middlebury earlier today to basically tell them similar to what I've told you and say now we need to make sure that we're under-promising and over-delivering, but also let's go out and gather some voice of customer so that we can have more feedback about the impacts of delays. Let's talk to some orders that were canceled. Let's talk to some people that we know went with the competition. Let's see to what degree not being rapid affects our reputation. Let's talk to customers about what's the word of mouth impact. Because I know we've heard anecdotally people haven't gone with us because we're slow, right? And it can be very damaging for our brand, especially in competitive situations. So, thoughts, Shannon?
So thank you for this and for the corresponding Excel that has the raw data that feeds into this, I'm assuming. It's really good stuff. One question, is this in place so that it'll update once Noah is no longer around to help us fill in the blanks?
Okay, so what I sent you is not actually the data that fed into this. That was the pipeline report that comes from Waitsfield. So
Okay.
some of the source data is the same. There's a separate sheet, which is a Google sheet, which I can share. But basically, this part is automated now, and London
Okay.
Middlebury knows how Zapier works, so they can help troubleshoot any challenges with this. So this part is going to start running, and then they can also pull out statistics and analytics and so on. The
Gotcha.
analysis, like the per customer, some human has to go and say, what date do we start counting from,
Mm.
order date or activation date. So that I'll do going forward. It's not like we have 100 customers a month, right? We have like 30 or 40, or I think our biggest month we had like 60 or something, but it's not an excessively onerous kind of admin to do.
Okay. Going into the, what does this not tell us? I agree. We want to know what those ins and outs are for all of those various stages to get what the metric should be. And I think we need that in our hand before we can go to WCVT and say, this is what we expect. Or at least having an idea of, hey, it should take X number of days from the time the order's placed till they're scouted, till they're, all of those different steps. We need to understand what the reality is so that we can pinpoint those bottlenecks and make recommendations to say, this is where you need to make improvements.
Yeah, the only caveat on that is that it's going to take some time to collect that data, because the thing is that, so the way that we're collecting it is CrowdFiber doesn't have any record of the date time of changes and order updates. So all it has is the latest available status of these fields. So basically anything prior to July 24th, the data is not really very clean. It's only orders placed in their entirety since then, because like we'll have, for example, an order that was scouted today, and Zapier will say it was scouted today, but then we don't know when to calculate, because we didn't. Well, actually, that's a bad example. We can tell the scouts because we know the order creation date, but the ones that were scouted July 23rd and the drop was installed today, we don't have any accurate way of calculating that. So
Understood. Yes.
So it will realistically, it'll probably take another at least 2 to 3 weeks before we have enough data to say, okay, we've looked at this and it looks like scouts are taking 3 weeks and drops are taking 2 weeks, or the other way too.
Understood. And I we can talk to WCVT before then to say, hey, we want to do this. But I think that having that data will really strengthen in that conversation and give us more leverage. That's my only point.
Yeah, and one of the other questions London Middlebury quite properly asked was, well, how long does the competition take? Which is something that I don't know. I mean, we can gather some anecdotes on it. I mean, I rather expect it's a little bit faster than this, but that's something where we can also try and gather some data points in the coming weeks to say, okay, we're taking this many weeks, and Fidium takes, this long, and GoNetspeed takes this long, and when we're competing head to head, it's highly problematic to take much longer.
Yep, got it.
Other thoughts? Steve, you're muted.
Good stuff. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank Noah. Noah did the heavy lifting here.
I imagine it's true, but correct me if I'm wrong, that WCVT, although they're not used to being in a competitive situation, they are now. And it must be true that they're worried about this too, at least to some extent, are they not?
I don't think they're worried about it. They've got kind of a guaranteed customer base. This is all gravy for them, all their CUDs. I think that's oversimplistic, but we have to kind of remember that everything they've been doing since they started working with us, is new to them. New installs, it's all new.
Yeah.
Of course, if it doesn't have their brand on it, if it has our brand, it doesn't make them look bad, does it?
Well, other than to the degree that we're quite public about who our partner is, but yeah, agreed.
It
And I
does
think,
make me wonder about whether, and this would maybe be a question also for London Middlebury, it makes me wonder about whether in some situations the brand needs to be Maple Broadband, and in other situations maybe the brand needs to be Maple Broadband WCVT. I mean,
yeah,
just a question.
just a question, indeed.
Yeah, the concern I have, and this is based on a conversation, Ellie, that I had with Mike Osland. We talked about Mike giving him a call. The fact that we're not differentiating by price. We're more expensive than the competition. So what we differentiate by is, from my perspective, I talk up WCBT big time. And it's an article of faith for me because we're running into things where they're not necessarily doing it that well, but this is critical for us. You know, why are you going to pay this kind of money this every month if you're not less expensive than the competition?
Yep.
But I just wonder if there's any advantage to us in being the sole brand in any step of this.
Maple Broadband powered by WCVT.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if we had to go back in time, it might have actually been a better move to use the Green Mountain Access brand across the network, because then they would have been motivated to take care of the brand. So
Yeah.
we could still have helped out with customer acquisition, because it obviously, every customer we get matters to us more than that, because their business is fine regardless of us. It's us that needs the customers if our business is going to survive. So we're always going to have more urgency than they do.
Well, I
But
wonder
anyway.
I wonder if it's too late.
We're still relatively new. I don't think it would be too late, my view, to do a powered by kind of thing, right?
Powered by Green Mountain Access.
Yeah, an Intel Inside kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's worth a conversation at least.
Yeah.
I think that kind of peripherally, Nancy, what I'm a little worried about is the fact that the network management agreement that we're operating under really needs to be fixed. And my worry level will drop a lot once we get them to sign the revised network management agreement that captures some of the flaws in the original document. So I know Ellie's working on it. She just said she's sending it out today, tomorrow. So it's in play.
Yep. And this is one of the things that I wanted to put in there, is that one of the things that our attorney has pointed out several times, that the agreement is silent on how long things take. And if you look at it, there's a annexure that talks about basically having targets and then action levels. And the items in there are the things that are around phone service and customer service, which they're already required to do to the PUC as a regulated entity. So conceptually, my suggestion is, especially because we know that BEAD and the federal government have some views about how long these things should take, and it's not 6 weeks plus, that we start to put into place the framework now, where if we don't get the BEAD award, it's still like we ourselves should have a target for how long these things should take. And if it's too far in excess of that target, we should sit down and have a chat about it as organizations about how to improve it. And if the BEAD program needs us to put more of a fine point on that, then we can. But I think in some ways, I mean, you're right, Shannon. But I think, I mean, there's two ways to look at this conversation. I mean, one is clearly we need to establish a floor or ceiling for how long, like what's our target for how long people should actually wait and what's our expectation. But another way to look at it is to look at it from the perspective of, okay, what would have to change to have people not take 6 weeks but to be installed in 6 days? I mean, I was sort of, I'll share this anecdote because I was on a call this morning with people in Kenya, and they were saying, yeah, so the competition, when someone calls up for service, they come out at an unpredetermined time. They show up unannounced 2 to 3 days later. And we're actually working on getting customers installed in 2 to 3 hours. And I'm sitting here like, Okay, so people in Kenya who are paying $10 to $20 a month are getting installed in 2 to 3 days as a worst case scenario. Like, let me just not repeat how it's happening here.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we've beat this one to death. I want to move
Yep.
on. Thank you guys. So this is a work in progress. We're gathering more data, and but I wanted to share with you the data to back up our anecdotes and feelings. So we'll get there. Okay, so the BEAD updates. I covered some of it earlier in the executive committee report, but just to give you guys an update as to what the next couple of months look like. So the VCBV will be publishing in one of their recent board packs. They put out a schedule, a tentative schedule, pending Volume 2 approval in July, and it's now August. But they'll probably be sticking to something like that schedule. They'll be revising it, but the basics is that the pre-proposal window opens August 22nd, and then that closes September 6th, and then they have a couple of weeks to have a look at what comes out there. Sometime in early October, they open the application window, and then I believe that's due in November. So, I mean, I'm not too wedded to what the dates were because we need to say what they actually are now and start to put those in as red lines in our calendar. But we have a couple of different threads that we're chasing. So one of them is the accounting thread, which, and again, I'm starting to divide my thinking into pre-award and post-award because the post-award stuff is important, but we really, the urgency here is to make sure that we have all of the pre-award items that we need to be able to put in our BEAD application. So some of them, of course, is understanding what is our project budget, because that then informs our match and it informs how much funding we need. And so back to what we were saying earlier, now that we have an award to JSI as quickly as humanly possible, we're going to get them contracted and get them going. And we even talked about that with them, that the very first thing they need to do is take the existing draft, the high level design that Vantage Point did 3 years ago, and update it for the BEAD world to make sure that it's actually efficient and that the serving areas count where are optimized for what we're actually building right now versus areas of Middlebury that have Fidium that we will not build in the foreseeable future. So once that's done, then we can start to, from a GIS like swag, we can figure out how many miles there are and how many have poles and how many don't, because that will be a very accurate guess. We will get it more accurate through some of the other items we've asked them to do, but that's going to be helpful for locking down the amount of funding that we need. And there's other GIS work, again, to separate the beads. So once the high level design is done, we can take the designed bit and separate out the bead areas, the middle mile to get to the bead areas, which can count as part of the budget, and then the other areas, all those separate buckets that I've talked about many times before. So I've been working with Lucas, the GIS consultant, and Noah to get all of the right infrastructure in place so that in a couple of weeks when we have this, we'll be able to hit the ground running and just run the numbers and pull them out and put them in. Jeff. You're muted. There you go.
What's the basis for the construction estimates? Is it what our unit costs have been for install plus some inflation?
Yep.
Okay, so
Plus
we don't
contingency. Yeah.
we don't need a third party to prepare any of that for our purposes of budgeting.
Nope.
Okay, and the first phase of work that the BEAD design JSI will do will give us the tally of how many miles, right?
They will give us a tally of how many miles. So they're doing more refined work later on to help us understand some of the other components and the amount of cable and to have a more refined and more informed budget. So but the number of miles is going to be probably 90% accurate. And so we'll try to get closer to 95, 98% before submitting our bid. But it's better than now where we really don't have any idea whatsoever because we don't know what the serving areas look like. And so it's hard to figure out the routes and hard to figure out the miles.
Okay. So that's our path to putting together the capital costs to take this on, right?
Yes.
And then as part of this process, do we then fold in what the operating revenue from that would look like to us? You know, how many customers we would glean? We're going to take on debt, right? So are we pulling in an assumed number of new customers from this effort as well? Okay.
Yeah, so one of the other things I've mentioned some time ago, and Noah has been working on it really hard, and next week is his last week, so he's going to we've talked about how to make sure that I at least get a minimum deliverable that gets me what I need, and then some optimizations on top of that. But basically what he's been working on is pulling information out of the GIS system and putting it into spreadsheet form, and then updating this formulas in the spreadsheets to better enable scenario planning so that we can do exactly that. So that when we have, so that part will be done so that when we have the more informed data, we can plug it in, because ultimately we need to put together a budget in order to have our BEAD bid, and Waitsfield needs to do the same thing, and we need to get together to have the joint budget and all of that joint proposal clearly. But the other thing we need to do is, as discussed earlier, if we're taking on debt, which at this point I anticipate that we would, as discussed earlier, for the two different uses, we need to make sure that that's a prudent and correct decision, which means that we need to have our financial model updated to account for what we're planning to build and what we're estimating it's going to cost. And the one thing I will say anecdotally is that we've always built in a 10 to 15% contingency, and we have so far, knock on wood, we've actually been under budget, even under original budget without contingency. So we do have a good track record thus far of cost containment. And we've learned some things, in particular, some of the areas of cost containment are around engineering costs, which a fixed bid is going to help us further contain. So I think what I'm trying to say is that I think we've been pretty conservative in our management, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that whatever is put forth is also properly conservative. And that's why when more of this analysis is done, we'll definitely want to run that past you, Jeff, and anyone else who wants to look at it before we even think about taking it to the governing board. Okay. So the other thing on that, I suppose I didn't put this in my report earlier, but it was in my head, so I'll write it down now, is to make sure that we all have a single framework, because right now all this information is in my head about all the different work streams we have to do, and I want to put that into at least a high level Gantt chart so that you guys can see it and we can start mapping out our BEAD to-do list at the executive committee level, and just make sure that you guys are all aware of all the different threads. Okay, that's what I have on BEAD. Is there any questions or concerns at this point?
Well, I wish Noah weren't going back to dumb college, and
I know, right? He's pretty awesome.
he sounds like he's doing just terrific work for us, and it does make me wonder again about whether we should be looking for an employee who can do what he does, or just talk him out of going back to college.
I don't think we could talk him out of going back to college, but if we could clone him, someone like that to do analysis and data would be pretty cool. Jeff?
Yeah.
Does he have the ability to do further internship work and receive credit?
I don't know. I haven't asked him that. He might. We could also pay him hourly if he's open to that. I'm just not sure if his schedule would permit.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly happy to talk with him about it because he's really, really great.
Yeah, I'm thinking both. You know, that if he could get credit and we paid him, that, you know, he could be highly motivated to maintain the relationship.
Yep. I'll raise it with him the next time I speak to him.
I mean, it must be, I mean, I just imagine it's true that, you know, when you're in college, you're in courses that have you do projects, and you're always looking for good projects to do, and rather than, you know, have them be simulations. Great idea, Jeff.
ACRPC does have a GIS engineer on staff. Ellie hasn't taken advantage of her. We really don't know what she's capable of. But if there's too much work and Ellie's shorthanded, we need to approach that, in my opinion.
Well, Steve, remember, Vakuda has a GIS consultant that's doing all the GIS work for us at no cost. So it's not GIS work that we need. It's more like either sometimes manual grunt work, data analysis, or automations, formulas, writing a little bit of code. It's more of a technical role, which is what a computer science major is good at.
Yeah, we don't know what Hannah is capable of, so she might be able to do all those things.
Yeah, she might, but she may also not be the optimal, ideal, and most cost-effective resource to do that either. I think that if we decide we want to go that route, and Noah, who's known and trusted and his hourly rate would be probably extremely reasonable, isn't interested, then we should maybe think about it a little bit and craft up a job description for a part-time hourly thing. And if Hannah and ACRPC want to bid, they can bid. There may be other Middlebury College students. There's a lot of bright kids in that place. Okay. So moving on, financials and treasurer updates. So Sai sent me earlier today the Q2 financials, and I didn't want to send them out just prior to this meeting because I didn't think that was enough notice, but she or I can send them out after and we can put them on the list for the next time we meet to talk about.
Yeah, and I think we need to footnote them a little bit because there are still a few danglers, last minute capitalization things that need to move around. But when I went on vacation, I absolutely turned my brain off, for which I apologize. And I had a download speed, I want you to know, of 2.5 on a very good day. So there was not much happening up there. But yes, we did that. And the other thing that Ellie and I spent a little time was looking at the financial dashboard from June, which got done in a huge rush. And there were a couple of numbers that just looked very odd, and finally discovered that we both missed an error that was made in the May financial dashboard. So both of them have been corrected, and I will send those along as well. But Ellie, I'll take care of just sending all of those docs out to the executive committee as soon as we stop talking.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sai.
And in the treasurer update, I've sent out a couple more notes to other people that I thought might like. I'm trying to guilt Magna into coming up with some thoughts and potential opportunities there, and just continue to squirrel along. But I think if we get into a place where we're just not making headway, we need to put an ad out there and look for somebody and pay them to do it, whatever it takes, because it's not like there's a ton of work and it's not really complicated, but it needs to have somebody doing it, and I'm ready to not be that person.
How long side do you think we need to wait before we put that ad out? I don't know where it would even go. I was talking to Ellie about Indeed. I don't even know if that's the solution, but how long are you willing to wait before we pull the trigger on an ad?
I think we should be pulling the trigger on the ad by the end of this month and see what we get, so that by the end of the year at the outside, you've got somebody in place.
Okay. That's reasonable. And Sai, can you give an update on where we are with the 2023 audit?
The 2023 audit is waiting for that last bit of capitalizing journal entry to go into place. And I talked to Bonnie, and we're firing it out to her, and then all hell will break loose and we'll see what happens. So that should go up to her, I would guess, probably midweek next week. I have one more conversation to have with Darlene.
Okay. Great. Anything for Sai? Thank you, Sai.
Mm-hmm.
It's been great to have you back and work through these things with you. Get them finally shoved off. Okay, so the next item on the schedule on the agenda is the executive committee meeting schedule. So as you guys all know, Jeff adds a lot of value to this, but he also has travel and work commitments, and our schedule of meeting ad hoc every other week, except for when it's 3 weeks, or sometimes changing things around, doesn't work to have Jeff be able to come reliably to meetings. So we were emailing back and forth, and my suggestion is that we consider, rather than having it every other week except for when it isn't, that we move to a regular first Monday and third Monday kind of schedule, so that there's some more predictability for Jeff, and that obviously avoids the second week, which is overlapping with the governing board, which we often cancel anyway. So it's just a suggestion that may not be the optimal solution, but that would also let people like me, if I want to plan vacations, be able to just know when the meetings are so that I can plan accordingly.
So what are you proposing? First and third?
First and third Thursdays.
Thursdays.
I think that's a great idea, Ellie. And if we need more meetings, we can make a call and deal with it.
All right. I don't know that we need a motion on this. It's more just up to the committee how we want to work. So if you guys are happy with that, I will adjust the calendar going forward so it's always the first and third, and then we can schedule other meetings as needed.
Yeah, with the exception of the performance review meeting we want to have with our executive committee.
Yeah.
'Cause Jeff's available for the next few weeks, I know, so we should be able to pull something off there.
Yeah. And thank you for considering that. I can feel a little uncomfortable to have it all be about me, but what I wanna offer to you is, I realize attendance is important, and I was just trying to lock down my travel schedule going forward, and that's why I sort of pressed this, so I think it all lines up well. I may have one conflict, but otherwise, I think this should work well and therefore can, commit to it.
I may have a conflict on the 15th of this month, but I'm not sure yet.
Okay. Yeah, but anyway, I think I did think it's a good suggestion because
Yeah.
basically we've been operating on the cadence of it's every week except for when it isn't, but
Yeah.
it isn't more often than it is, and it does make things challenging for Jeff, but also for others as well. And if we have new executive committee members in the future, it's just that much easier because, yeah, people have day jobs and day jobs have commitments. Okay, so I'm going to make that change. When we get to the end with future meeting, you guys can talk about your next meeting because I'm not going to be at that one. So I don't care when y'all do it.
And actually, I should, I think I've got this right. Yeah, I think this month is the oddball for me, where it is the third week that I'm traveling. So the 15th would also not work for me.
Okay,
So,
well, let's have a look at the schedule for the remainder of August later because I'm also
Yeah.
on vacation as well. So let's do that when we get to
Right.
the future meeting at the
Okay.
end of the agenda. And then for
Got it.
now, I'll make that change from September. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so I believe we're saying first and third. If we're implementing it now, and it would be the 1st and 15th, but the meeting to talk about our executive director, we can have that meeting a week from today. If everyone on the call is okay with it, let's just agree to it now, and then I'll take care of the agendas and stuff like that, Ellie. So is everybody okay with that? So we can get, I don't know where Carl is. I'm trying to round him up, but okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is that okay with everyone? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so next up is the parking lot. Is there anything on the parking lot anyone wants to talk about? I guess I'll say that Steve and I are actively working both Middlebury and Ripton hub discussions with various stakeholders, but we don't have any candidate locations that are at the point of being close to final yet. Anything else? Okay, so we can move on to marketing updates. We have 20 minutes left, so I'm going to take just a couple of minutes here. I've covered some of this in the executive director report, but we had our final call with Pivot yesterday, just tying up all the loose ends from them. I believe we have tied up all of the loose ends. Had a kickoff call with more of an operation, like a tactical kickoff call with London Middlebury earlier today, and I'm going to go through and give them systems access and a couple of tours of back-end systems tomorrow. But they've really hit the ground running. They started their what do they call it? Their quick upload speeds process already, doing a whole bunch of research. They read the Benson Institute's report on CUDs, and there's a number of errors in there about Maple Broadband, which was kind of funny to talk about that. But I wanted to, if you guys will indulge me, I wanted to take an example of just some of the immediate work product improvement that I've seen. So one of the things that we've been talking about for a while is showing about the change in the broadband situation in Addison County over time. So this is something that I spoke with Pivot about for some time. I'm still waiting on final numbers from 2024 from Lucas. I mean, I shouldn't say final because we're halfway through the year, but the point is we've built a lot more fiber than the data that's available from the best available data set, which is the FCC data from the end of last year. We've built a lot of fiber this year, and I didn't want to leave that off of the report because we have better access to data. So I'm waiting for that from Lucas. But in the meantime, especially knowing Pivot's retainer was up, I said, okay, we'll just do the best you can, create an infographic around the state of how fiber has changed in Addison County from 2021 to 2024. And so I sent them a little spreadsheet, which had the best available, the percent of households that were DSL was the best available technology, where cable was the best available technology, and where fiber was the best available technology, and then a little bit of a narrative about what Maple Broadband had done in those years. And this is what they came up with, which is basically they took my Excel spreadsheet and they put it into this, including my I've just been saying it like, the state of play of broadband. So this is what they came up with. And I mean, if you look at the headline here, Maple by the numbers, like it doesn't even make any sense. It wasn't like, we had 41% DSL in 2021, design, planning, procuring materials. Like it clearly very little thought was put into this. I think we can probably all agree. Now, so London Middlebury was at the call on Tuesday where I gave Pivot some feedback on let's, obviously this isn't quite what I was looking for. Let's kind of talk about this and see if you guys have any ideas about how better to represent this. And there were some, I think you were there, Steve. There was a little bit of like blank looks from Pivot. And then
Yeah.
Ashley from London Middlebury had, she said, well, maybe a line chart would work. So that was Tuesday. Today is Thursday. This is one of the things that they showed me in the workshop today. Is like, hey, what do you think about this as an infographic? So like, showing fiber's explosive growth. Here's a line graph. I mean, like this part, we could excuse them because they're not as much up to speed on broadband, but like, just so much better.
That's beautiful.
Isn't it? So that's just one little anecdote, but very positive so far. This is not final. Numbers aren't final. We'll refine this, but this is the story we want to be telling, which is that and again, one of the things they brought up as well is, hey, like, we've heard you talk verbally about like, this is what's happened and you've done some of it and others have, spurred others to do things. And how do we visualize that? What data is available? So we talked about that. So that's probably something that I didn't get, but like, Pivot didn't even think to ask the question, like, how do we draw out what you've done versus what you have inspired or caused to happen, right? And London Middlebury was already there, so I'm so far very happy. That's all that I have to say about marketing.
Great.
Okay, Maple Broadband full performance review. I moved this down to updates just because I knew today was going to be a busy meeting, and I have so far I sent this out to everyone in the executive committee, which includes our treasurer and clerk. So that's a total of 7 people. I've received 4 responses. So I'm not sure who the 3 laggards are, but I will. Okay, that's 1. That's 2. I'm not sure if the other one is. Maybe the other one's Carl, who's not here to fess up. So yes, if you laggards could fill out the thing. And I know Steve was texting Carl earlier. If you could ask Carl to please fill out as well, that would be great. And then the next time we meet, we can talk about the results of that. Okay, anything else on that? Okay, so affordability. I sent you guys as well. This is in your pack. There is a concept note for what Vacuda wants to do around affordability. And Steve and Nancy were at the Vacuda pre-meeting before the board meeting where we explored this in more depth. So I know that 2 of you guys are really up to speed on the details here, but the idea here is twofold. One is that we all know that, I shouldn't say we all know that the ACP is never coming back, because who knows, anything could happen, it might come back. It made it out of Senate committee yesterday, so anything's possible. Ooh. Yeah, but they still have to deal with the House, right? Anyway, so anything is possible, we live in hope, but there's 2 things that we wanted to do here. The first one is as you guys have seen, and there was a little segment on the Vermont Public yesterday. There was a very public back and forth discussion between 2 of the VCBB board members with a disagreement as to the original statutory intent. So, which was kind of odd since one of the people debating was actually one of the legislative architects of the statute. But so it was very strange, and it started to cause some press reaction. And And actually, as a matter of fact, I got a call from Andy Ricaldi today. I think because of that, and he wants to do an article on Maple Broadband very shortly, so I'm going to send him some numbers. So that's good. So something positive has happened out of that. But the point is, we've been talking about affordability for months, and no one's got a plan. Everyone says it's a problem. No one has a plan. And the VCB is working on trying to pass a policy which is more like a grantee mandate, which is, I mean, nothing against that. They have every right to do that if they want to, but it's not actually going to solve it. It can solve portions of the problem, but it's not a holistic, comprehensive approach to dealing with affordability. So we were talking about this and eventually got to the point of, okay, we've got some grant money that's available already within Vacuda. Let's use this money to do two things. The first thing is to do some research to better inform what a well thought through, well designed grant program would look like in the state of Vermont, encompassing things like how much can people actually afford? That's a question no one's ever answered. To what degree do provider economics impact the subsidy that a provider should receive? Does a customer of let's even pick on us versus Northeast Kingdom. We're in a better financial shape than we are, just given a bunch of things, right? So do we need the same subsidies that they do, or do they need a little bit more? And then also, we all are aware that it was very painful to get people validated and verified for eligibility through the ACP and the National Verifier. But also, eligibility isn't a static thing. It's not like you qualify and then you qualify forevermore. Sometimes you may improve your economic situation and no longer qualify. So what's the optimal way to do that and make it as easy as possible for service provider, for customer, and reduce program overhead and reduce the amount of outreach costs? So really just researching what would a well-designed program look like, how would we do it, and then taking it to the next step of actually piloting it and taking the lessons learned from that. And the idea is this is a useful exercise in its own right, and hopefully it will inform better models of potential future subsidies, either at state level, perhaps on a limited basis to CUDs, or even maybe at the national level. Our Senator Welch being such a good proponent of broadband, and may possibly have other allies that are actually interested in, because basically, if you think about it, a flat fee of $30 a month is rurally regressive. That, if your service providers, if your average cost of service is $20 or $30 a month in a city, that's great. And if the cheapest available service to you in a rural area is $50 or $60 or $70 at the same income level, flat subsidies fundamentally not equitable. So anyway, so that's the thinking. So the Vacuda board passed in concept, taking some grant money and doing this. We still need to get VCBB staff approval on the uses of these funds, and then we'll put it into play. So wanted to give you guys an update on this. Nancy.
So you're describing it as research, and I understood it as research that would include some piloting of approaches.
Yep.
So it's important to.
Yeah, the first maybe a better way of putting it is the first stage is research, the second stage is data-driven program design, and the third stage is piloting, lessons learned, and refinement. Because no plan survives first contact with reality, right?
Yeah.
So, and it looks like Volume 2 is approved.
Excellent. So
slow news day.
Right. So what I didn't get, I wasn't at the Vacuda meeting after that after the policy meeting, legislative policy meeting. Do you have a sense of what the next steps will be now on this?
The next step is for the VCBB staff to approve the use of grant funds for this amount, and then after that, the next step I think is going to be to write up the scope of work, basically write out in more detail what this is actually going to look like. There's also a separate initiative to have a pledge that CUDs would take in support of affordability. So this is one of the things that if you want to participate in this grant program, you have to take a pledge that basically says, we care about affordability, we're going to work to promote this program, and yada yada other things. But I think this is important and a good thing to do in its own right. It could generate some good PR, but also it's an important feedback for the VCBB so that they can see, CUDs have taken this pledge, and there's a pilot program around affordability, and they can take the fact that we have made an affirmative pledge which could be thought of as a form of industry best practice or industry self-regulation, and could reference that in their policy versus having to think up something from scratch themselves.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
movement forward on affordability. Watch this space. I'm quite excited. I've been working behind the scenes on this for a couple of weeks. So,
Well, I was surprised and thrilled about this development, Ellie, as you know.
yep. Well, it's not a done deal yet, but it's looking very promising. So we just, obviously staff has been busy with volume 2 and NTIA this week. And so we're going to circle up with them tomorrow, because if they approve in principle, it's really a matter of working out the details and just going.
Yep.
So, okay. I don't have any other updates. Steve, do you have any other updates?
Nope.
Anything else anyone wants to raise under other that we haven't talked about? Okay. So future meetings. So you guys are meeting next week. You can use the same bridge. I just won't attend. That's fine. And are we, because I know, looking at the future dates this month, I know, Nancy, you said that you have a conflict the 15th and Jeff has a conflict the 15th.
I may. I'm not sure.
Because the next week, the 22nd, I'm out. So, and then the after that is the 29th.
As much as I think these meetings are helpful, I would suggest we hold, after today's meeting, executive committee meeting, I would move that we hold our next meeting on the 29th, which is right before our next governing board meeting. And that'll give Ellie, you more time to work on things besides making up new agendas.
Okay. So that would be then, but then would we meet the first week of September as well, or would we skip that one and go to the third week of September and then be first and third after that? Asking for a friend.
It doesn't. I think I'm most interested in keeping your administrative time to a minimum, Ellie. So whatever we need to do to give you some time back that you don't have to spend wrangling agendas and whatnot is what I'm all for. So if you want to call it, I think we'll probably all follow you.
All right. So let's have the 29th of August, and then skip the 5th. We'll have the governing board the 10th. We'll meet again the 19th. So basically, we'll be first and third, but skipping the first week of September. And then if something comes up where we need a procurement approval or something like that, we can just do a quick emergency meeting for that, or do a vote count via email, and then just get together with a minimum group for the purposes of rubber stamping it. Nancy.
So, Steve, for the meeting on the 8th, what do you need the members of the executive committee to do before that?
I have floated some ideas, and they've not been enthusiastically responded to.
Well, I mean, I think I'll get very enthusiastic as soon as you remind me what I'm supposed to do.
No,
especially since I need to do it a week from today.
Yeah, I guess, to be honest with you, to be really transparent right in front of Ellie, is that I think she's doing a brilliant job, and we just need to figure out salary treatment. And if we have some suggestions, if any of you have, if the executive committee has suggestions for, recommendations, let's include that in our communication with her. But even in today's meeting, she's done things that I haven't even thought about. So it's hard to critique her a lot because she's doing such a great job. So,
well, if you could just resend the categories, tell us to, remind us of the categories, remind us of, what you want us to do in terms of comments, so that you won't have to write those all from scratch yourself. Okay. And then if there's anything else you want us to think about before the 8th, that would be great. Okay. And what I'd add to that, Nancy, happy to do it, is that if some of the executive committee members decide not to respond to that, in other words, if some of you feel it's busy work, we're good. I'm good. I'll take whatever you folks give me.
and I can work it from there.
Okay,
But I'll do that, Ellie, Nancy,
Okay.
per your request, and I've got to get the agenda together too, so I'll put that all
Okay.
together and get something out to you shortly.
okay, great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. So we've finished up with our agenda. So I will update the calendar going forward, figure out how best to do that, which may be I'll figure out how best to do that.
We'll know a lot more, Ellie. At the end of this month, even you'll know how bad it is as far as how much sleep you're getting these days.
Yeah, I think probably what I'll do just to make it easier is I will cancel all of the occurrences of this meeting through the end of, other than the ones we've discussed, through the end of September, and then I'll adjust the invite going forward from the end of October. Otherwise, it's going to do weird things like give us different meeting IDs for different days, which is going to make a hassle because the agenda, the link is always the same. So,
Right.
okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. We
you.
finished 3 minutes early.
Oh my God.
Yay, us.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Speak to you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.